Iain from RTO here. Welcome to Pick and Mix, and this week it is mixing it up, and it's the final mixing it up because we're going to replace it with another old favourite, just to swap things around about. And we're going to end this producers by talking about one of the finest and most influential sound engineers, producers that ever come out of this country, and it is Joe Meek. Joe Meek, or born Robert George Meek, on the 5th of April 1929, and sadly and tragically took his own life on February the 3rd, 1967. He couldn't read music. He couldn't play an instrument, but he used to hum these tunes. And it was left to Jeff Goddard, who was associated with him, to turn these tunes, these little hums, into tunes, because Joe couldn't play, but he knew how to do stuff. Now, he didn't do this in a studio. It was done in his home, which was a third floor flat in Holloway Road, number 304, and it was above a leather shop, which is totally bizarre. And I will talk about it in a bit later, but you know, he's worked with so many different people. You know, people like Richie Blackmore, Chaz Hoddridge from Chaz and Dave, Clem Clemety. These are all people that worked, and the name of his landlady was Mrs. Violet Shenton. So he produced some. So what we're going to do today, we're going to look at his charting singles, because we could be here forever. So we'll have a look at these, and then I shall pick my favourite topics. So the first one that actually and I didn't know this, he would produce this, was back in 1957. He got to number 14 in the charts, and it's Gary Miller and the Garden of Eden. Now, I didn't know that he'd produced this, and I've always liked this song. There's just something about it. I think it was because it was in a thing that Robbie Coltrane was in about the band called Majestics. I can't remember the name of the show, but that was played in it a lot. Then in January of 1958, a year later, he produces another song for Gary Miller, The Story of My Life, and it got to number 14 again. It's very Perry Como style, but there's just something unique about that sound. Then in 1959 October, he had his first number one song, and I didn't know that Joe Meek produced this, and it's a Milford and the Chapmakes, What Do You Want to Make My Eyes at Me For? One of my favourite songs of the 50s. My mum had this on the Pie label, I believe it was the purple one. It's a great track. I love the harmonies on it. Just a fantastic track. Then Busy Man in October 59. There's a chap called David Macbeth. He had a single out and he got number 18 in the charts. It's called Mr. Blue. It's okay. I do like the guitar bits on here, and I wouldn't be surprised if this was recorded by the Outlaws, because he was part of the Outlaws were sort of his sort of band, and he managed them, and that's where Richie Blackmore started. Chaz Hoddridge was in the band as well, and Clem Clemety. So you know, these guys started their work with Joe. So Lance Fortune had a single out in February of 1960, and it got to number 4. and it's called Be Mine. Reminds me a little bit of the sound that Adam Faith used to get, you know, that ding dong ding 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 dong. It's not a bad track, actually. I don't mind that one, and it's one that I know. Again, I didn't know Joe Meek had produced it and engineered it in that little flat. Okay, May of 1960, Lance Fortune brings out This Is the Love I Have for You. Got to number 26. This is okay, but the sound was so unique for its period. Some nice tones on it. Then in 1961, he works with John Layton. Now, John Layton's more of an actor, and of course he was in The Great Escape, played one of the Tunnel Kings. But in August 1961, he had a #1 hit with Johnny Remember Me. And they say it's all a bit about Buddy Holly and a premonition and all that sort of thing. It's a really good song. I don't mind that one. Staying in 1961, this definitely got the Outlaws on it. And it's Mike Berry. And Mike Berry went on as an actor as well. He played Mr. Spooner in Are You Being Served? And this is a thing called A Tribute to Buddy Holly. It's really good, and I do believe Richie Blackmore played on this. I'm not thinking, and Chaz Hosage played I think the bass. So it's not bad. My dad had this, so I know that song. Then again, all these singles were coming out. This one was released on the 2nd of October 61, and he got to #2, and it's another song by John Layton, Wild Wind. And once again, backed by the Outlaws. It's brilliant. I like that song, really good. Then in December of 61, I think this is the best song, but it didn't get in the top 10, and it's Son, This Is She. And this is where that real sound that Joe was creating really comes into its prominence here. It's a really good song, and I can't understand why it didn't do better. Started the new year in 62. A song that got to number 39 in the charts, and it's from Ian Gregory, who spells his name properly. Obviously he's a Scot. And it's called Can You Hear the Beat of My Broken Heart? This had certainly a unique style that Joe Meek had. And you can't believe this was done in flat, and absolutely brilliant song. Back with John Layton in May of 62, a song that got to number 14 for him, Lonely City, isn't a bad track. And then in September 62, he had a huge hit. He wrote this, well, he hummed it, and George played it, but it was given to the Tornadoes, and it's Telstar, one of the great songs of the 60s, and it's the first song to be #1 on both sides of the Atlantic. It's just an iconic song. Love it. Then he goes back in with, takes a break. Obviously he was busy. And of course the Tornadoes, their guitar player was George Bellamy, whose son, though he's the keyboard player, I think. I can't remember which one, but George Bellamy has got a famous son, and that's Matt Bellamy of Muse. So, as I was saying, he went back and worked with Mike Berry, and they had a little top 10 hit, got to number 6. Don't You Think It's Time? Sounds similar, sound. Yeah, it's okay. Then he has another hit with the Tornadoes. It got to number 5, and it's called Globetrotter. And I think I remember this in the Disappointed I Did with Richard. It does sound like it's playing by the resident band in a caravan club hotel Clubhouse. It's not very good. Then we had another song from the Tornadoes, Robot, got to number 17. I think they were they had that one hit and they never really really hit the big time, did they? It's all right, that one. And then Ice Cream Ram, that came out in June of 63. It's not too bad. So I like the quirky keyboards in it. It's one of the better ones. Okay, again in 63. This is all 63. He does a song with Heinz Burt, who was the bass player with the Tornadoes, and it got to number 5, and it's just like Eddie. Now, Heinz Burt allegedly was having a bit of a fling with Joe, which was all a bit hush-hush in the 60s. The song is about Eddie Cochran. It's a good track, I like it. So we move on to 1964. And one of my favourite songs of the 60s. It came out, it got to number 1, another number 1. And it's the Honeycombs. Have I the Right? Absolutely brilliant. Of course, the drummer was Honey Langton, a female drummer, which in the 60s was something interesting, but it is absolutely brilliant. Then in 1965 it started, sort of the wheels started coming off. He'd got a lot of problems, and he does another song with Heinz, Digging My Potatoes, and they was camped outside, I think it was at EMI Studios, giving away hot potatoes. Yeah, it's a bit of a fun track, but he only got to number 49. And then he does another song with the Honeycombs, That's the Way. Got to number 12, another good track, not as good as I Have the Right. And that sort of went paired shape as well. The two guys that wrote that, they all had a bit of a fallout. And the last thing that, the last single he had in the charts was in 1966. It got to 26, The Crying Shames and Please Stay. It's a dreary, terrible song. So, my favourite top 5 singles, I think, that were produced by Joe. First one is Mike Berry's Tribute to Buddy Holly. I love the sound on that, and they do that little bit of Peggy Sue on it. It's pretty decent. Then there's Heinz and Just Like Eddie, another tribute to another rock and roll star, Eddie Cochran. Absolutely one of the best songs that Heinz ever did on his own. Then we've got Emile Ford and his Chet Makes What Do You Want to Make Those Eyes at Me For? A little bit of that doo-woppy doo-doo. It's just a pretty cool single. Number 2 for me is Telstar by the Tornadoes. Just an iconic instrumental hit. Brilliant stuff. But my favourite song that he produced, one of my favourite songs from the 60s, and it's Have I the Right by the Honeycombs. I just love Honey Langtry's drumming on it, and I love the guitar tones on it. It's absolutely brilliant. It's got a bit of a stomp to it, and there's allegedly that everybody that was in the studio or in the flat at the time was stomping on the floor, and they upset Violet. That's a probably, I don't know how true that is, but there we go. A very talented man was Joe Meek. Unfortunately, I think as time's gone on, it sounds like he was actually suffered from bipolar and schizophrenia. I mean, his commercial success was very short-lived, and he gradually sank into debt because someone tried to sue him over some stuff, and it went to court, and he lost a lot of money. And sadly, on the 3rd of February, Meek killed his landlady Violet, whom they'd argued over the loudness of the story and rent. And then he shot himself. It's so sad. I mean, if he lived today, he would have had more help, but it's just tragic. Those thousands of unreleased recordings later shed the T-chest tapes. His reputation and experiments recording music was acknowledged by the Music Producers Guild in 2009 and created the Joe Meek Award for Innovation in Production as a homage to this great guy. In 2014, Joe was ranked one of the greatest producers of all time by NME, elaborating Meek was a complete trailblazer, attempting endless new ideas in search of the perfect sound. The legacy of his endless experimentation is written over most of your favourite music today. And while we're on the subject of Joe Meek, if you ever get a chance to see that, watch this movie. This is a brilliant movie done by Nick Moran. Con O'Neill plays Joe in it. Lots of people you know in here. Ralph Little's in it, Sean Evans, James Corden, Pam Ferris plays Violet, and actually Chaz Hosses plays one of the neighbours. He gets a little scenario in there as well. Ralph Little played Chaz. There's a cop played Richie Blackmore, can't think of his name, but it's a very good film. And this is, it tells you all. I don't know how much is. I think it's a lot of it is sort of actors thing, but there's a lot of truth in this. So if you ever get to see this, I would recommend it. If you love 60s music, it is a must. So there we go. Very short one, but an important person in music today. Okay, that's all for today. We'll be back tonight for the final live stream before Christmas. And then tomorrow we have got live album, and we're going to be looking at the live albums of the maestro of the guitar, the player's player, and it's Mr. Jeff Beck. Also tomorrow we've got a one-off album, and it's another album produced by Jim Steinman. Now he did this for a band called Pandora's Box, and the album's called The Original Sin, and yes, there are tunes on there that you will know. Never heard of the band, but the tunes you will have heard of. So that's all coming up, so bye for now.